Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, the election in Georgia that we already spent some time anticipating has come and gone, and it looks as if the Georgia Dream Party has won a very comfortable victory. They have something like 54% of the vote, so they will obviously be in a strong position to form the next government. But it's very unlikely that the European Union and the international community will let it go at that. And
They
already
won't let it go unpunished. Okay.
unpunished, exactly. You're not supposed to vote the wrong way. They weren't able to pull off the scam that they pulled off in Moldova last week, when in the last minutes of the vote count, suddenly they found the right number of votes to get to 50.1% of the vote. They couldn't do it this time. However, already there is, the shouting for that this was intimidation, fraud, ballot stuffing. All these allegations already bubbling up. But what was interesting, it was yesterday evening, the exit polls, the opposition party was coming up with these exit polls suggesting that they were going to win easily. And indeed, the Georgian president, that woman who was kind of parachuted in as Georgia's president, who spent all her life in France, never been to Georgia,
Quite literally, Madame President.
Madame President, she also tweeted out early in the evening that the opposition had won. So obviously, they're not going to let it go. And I think there will become some kind of a foreign intervention. The question then is, will this succeed? An attempt to overturn this election result. What do you think?
Well, for the Georgia Dream Party, the advantage they have is the case studies that we're starting in Serbia, the former Yugoslavia, and we have, of course, the Maidan in Ukraine. I mean, they do have precedents to look at. Okay, making sure the security forces are loyal. Keep an eye on foreigners coming into the
Very
country.
much so. Yeah.
Look at what kind of money is being thrown around through their banking system, and there's some prerequisites now that you can look to forestall. But as you and I have talked many times, this is a blood sport. They play for keeps. Okay, so. Okay, it's a fraudulent election. It's blah 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 blah. I've been in Georgia during elections. Okay, the rent-a-crowd is a very thriving business there on all sides. Okay, so I just hope that the security forces are loyal to the state
Mm-hmm.
and not to politicians
Right.
to keep order.
Right.
And so my prognosis is we're not out of the woods yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is the weekend. Okay, so let's see what the bureaucrats in Brussels have to say tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Okay, and what the likes of Blinken and all of that. So because it's not Euro-Atlantic aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Georgia, by the way, Georgia? Caucasus, right?
It's
Okay.
in the Caucasus, yeah, east of the Black Sea. Yeah.
So it's about NATO. It's
Mm-hmm.
NATO, and more NATO. This is what this is about, and it's always the turn to the European Union, to European institutions. That's the gateway to, well, get them into
Right.
NATO first, and then we'll figure it out later. Okay,
Right.
so because that it's not because democracy is important. I don't think these people even
No,
know how to spell the word,
no,
to be
no.
honest with you. But they'll use whatever means. Fraud, okay, fine, okay.
That's right. No, I agree. I think they're going to give it a very good try. But it does look as if the Georgians have become quite sophisticated and prepared, because they pulled this stunt when on the issue of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. They did this twice. They made a massive push to try to get this law annulled, or at least the bill cancelled. And the first time it looked as if it had succeeded. The government said, okay, we're withdrawing this bill, but then they reintroduced the bill. And the second time it didn't succeed. So that bill has now become law. And the EU was absolutely enraged over this. And then the same thing happened with the LGBTQ plus legislation. Again, the whole hysteria, repression against gays and whatever. It wasn't any talk about it. It was just basically moving the law back to where it was in most European countries about 50 years ago. I mean, so it wasn't exactly that backward. Back in the 1990s, that was the way it was in most European countries, which is, homosexuality is legal, but you can't propagate it in a public setting like public schools. So that's all it was. But nonetheless, that induced great hysteria with Europe. But nonetheless, the Georgians went ahead and weren't intimidated. So, I think they're going to probably stand their ground. But as you say, we're not out of the woods. Who knows how it's going to go. The EU NATO gang, they don't give up that easily. I mean, for them, Georgia's a prize real estate. They couldn't care less about 4 million Georgians. Georgia's never going to be in the EU. That's out of the question. But they like that, just right. That's on the Black Sea coast, on the east. It's right next to Azerbaijan. They want all that. They want to move all the oil and gas from Azerbaijan, bypassing Russia. So for them, Georgia is a valuable piece of real estate, and they want to get rid of these Georgia Dream people who are standing in the way. So that's why I think they're going to persist. And even if they fail in the immediate future, in the immediate few weeks and months, they're going to still try and overturn this Georgia Dream government.
There's a lot of good reasons why they will, or at least should, stand their ground. First of all, what happened in August 2008? The Bush administration, it's still kind of murky, but basically giving them a nod and a nudge, like, go ahead, okay. I was reading some articles leading up to the election. George, how many news outlets saying that there were Russians in the north of Georgia? They were Ossetians. They're not Russians, okay? And there was Abkhazia. They're Abkhazi, okay? I mean, the reporting on it was appalling. But the standing your ground. Look what they did to Ukraine.
Yep.
Okay, they obviously, when I first went there, Shevardnadze was still around, okay? Yes. And it was a very corrupt place, okay? Everybody knew everybody was on the take, okay? Right. And there was a lot of young people, rightfully so, saying, we can't keep living this way, all right? Right. And so, if it's going to be trans rights, that the West is going to latch on to that as a wedge issue, okay? Right. In the early 2000s, it was corruption, so that's a wedge issue, okay? And I think also thinking people are saying, well, EU, look what they do to Orban, look what they do to the Hungarians. Do we really want to join this club?
That's right. It's interesting. Orban was, I think, about the first leader who sent his congratulations via Twitter or X. And that's exactly right. And I think Georgians have learned their lessons from that, and I think they figured out, well, the EU and NATO gang, they don't really care about us. They just want to use us again, as a battering ram against Russia, that they, basically open up a second front against Russia, irrespective of how much death and destruction that's going to bring us. And that's why I think this wasn't a persuasive argument. I think Georgians realize that if we vote in the opposition, we are going to go down the path of Maidan. We're going to get ourselves into a confrontation with Russia that's going to end even more disastrously than the one in 2008 did. So I think they realized, no, we're not going down. That's I think why the scale of this victory was really so great. I mean, this wasn't close, and why NATO would just be enraged by the fact that they lost it. Georgia from whenever Shevardnadze took over, it wasn't 1991, and there was a little bit of time before he took over. There was that crazy guy, that Gamsa Kurdia,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then Shevardnadze took over.
Ethno-Nazi, basically.
Yes, exactly. And then Shevardnadze, and the West loved Shevardnadze. They remembered him from his disastrous Gorbachev days. And then they thought, oh, well, we'll get rid of Shevardnadze and bring in somebody even more pro-Western. And then all of that ended. So the Georgia project really hasn't worked for the West. I mean, they've essentially lost Georgia. No, they had it, and now they've lost it.
Not for the lack of money,
Not for the
not
lack
for
of money.
lack of NGOs.
Right.
Okay. I
Right.
mean, George and I a few months ago were aghast but not surprised. Is that, the EU is punishing Georgia for promoting transparency laws.
Yes.
And this is absurd.
Right.
Absurd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's called the demonstration effect, everyone. I mean, they look around the neighborhood and say, just that, is it all this worth a NATO base? Really?
Right. Right.
Is that what they get out of it and we get what? We can be janitors and cleaning ladies in the base?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that it?
Exactly. Yeah. That's
And
the
and,
yeah.
and the fact is that the Georgia-Russia relationship is very complicated and very colorful as well. Okay, if you watch the nightly news broadcasts, I mean, you're Georgians all over the place. Okay, there are plenty of Georgians everywhere. Okay,
Right.
and I've been to Georgia many times, and I got the impression, that we're a little too close. You guys kind of take all the room out of
Right.
oxygen out of the room. Okay,
Right.
for two. Okay, and I get that. I get that. Okay, but the people that have made the wealthiest people in Georgia made their money in Russia. Okay. You can't deny that, okay? The trade links, I mean, and this is what's infuriated the EU, slowly but surely, without much fanfare, number one, they haven't gone along with the sanctions. Number two, trade has been going up, okay, which benefits
Right.
everybody,
Right.
okay? And then they announce the direct flights, which is really convenient for a lot of people, okay?
Right. Right.
So it's one of these peculiar things. If you were to do a very unscientific poll walking down the street, what do you think of Georgians? I love Georgians. What's wrong with Georgians? Okay, there's no animosity at all.
Right.
Okay, and then you bring in, somebody whacking jobs like Saakashvili, which I don't think he cares one way or another. But we're going to make you famous. We're going to make you get you money and
Okay.
fame, and we're going to fly you all over the place. All you have to do is say you hate the Russians. Okay, I'm on board. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's right. I think the question now is what happens in Moldova, because we've got the second round of the presidential election, and I'm assuming that the issue of the the lack of polling stations in Russia is still going to be an issue. Because last time, when you had basically two polling stations only in Russia, even though the greatest proportion of the Moldovan diaspora is in Russia, but there were only two polling stations, and then 5,000 ballot papers each at these polling stations. So they replicate that. I guess this Maya Sandu will be reelected. Now, I'm assuming Maya Sandu is going to make trouble. I mean, that's her whole function. The only reason why the NATO and EU are pushing her is that they want her to make trouble for Russia. And once she's been reelected, I think she's going to try to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But she'll always have a private jet fueled up on the tarmac, everyone.
Right.
That's what these people do. I haven't been to Moldova, but I've met countless Moldovans, and they're basically very laborers. They're very poor people, very warm people, nice people, and they're only here because of the just god-awful corruption and
Right.
just malfunctioning of the state and everything. I mean, they want to go home. They love their homeland, but I mean, it's just impossible. And so this is what the incumbent president is saying: we're going to give you NATO. We'll try on anti-corruption. But you know what? Being a NATO aspirant, I suppose if I took enough time and effort, the corruption quotient will probably go up because
Yeah, yeah.
money will be pumped in,
Yes.
okay, and then line in those pockets,
Right.
okay, it's
Right.
going to make things even worse,
They are.
okay.
That's exactly. And I think, um, I mean, I think the Georgians obviously realize that it's going to make things even worse because of all this EU money. They're not going to see any of this EU money. All that money would just simply be stolen. It'll be just the elites grabbing this money. But there was a very amusing article, of course, in Politico the other day saying, "Oh, all these lies, Russian-inspired lies," and saying, and they're putting out these myths like, "Oh, wealthy Europeans are going to come up and buy up the land." What a complete myth! That's a myth. No, that's exactly what's going to happen, and they know that's what's going to happen. The more you go on this European path, rich Europeans are going to come up and buy up your land, and then you forget about having any of your land
Yeah.
there. Yeah,
Well, they'll buy the land, they'll gate it off, and then they'll buy
yeah,
another piece of land, have their
yeah,
own private airport, and then
yeah.
they'll have their own private shopping center and
Yes.
and they'll never touch or see a Moldovan outside
No.
the city.
Exactly. And well, yeah, you'll be able to, clean their gardens and, and shine their shoes, serve cocktails for them at their bars. And that's it. And of course, they will know this is what's going to happen. This our European future. You're not going to be a member of the EU. They're just going to say,
Never. They will never be. The EU will collapse before Moldova makes it in.
yeah. I mean, if you look at the EU has still, even though North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, they're all members of NATO. Yeah, they're not in the EU. Again, there's no prospect of their being in the EU. So if they can't get in, you think you're going to get in? You think really they're going to push you right to the front of the line? Turkey, Turkey's not getting in. Serbia not getting in. So the whole idea that Moldova, this poor country, has any chance of actually jumping the queue and getting in front of all these people, no, it's not going to happen. Again, it's a vital piece of real estate for NATO. That's the only interest in Moldova.
For Moldova.
Yeah,
Okay, but if the past is prologue, there's nothing to stop them with this election machinations
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Okay, I mean, I would be surprised.
I'd be
Um,
surprised. Yeah, I
unless
think, yeah.
unless the I don't remember how many other candidates were running. It was pretty
Well, this is just a two. It'll be the
no, that's
the
but
playoff.
it was very
Just
crowded.
yeah,
We'll
that's
see.
right. So it's just the top two. But she's got 42%. 42%. With that phony election. So it should be relatively easy to secure this 50.1% that she needs. So I think that's going to happen, and then I think they're going to do the usual nonsense in Moldova, trying to make life as difficult as possible for Russia. Maybe start something in Transnistria. They're always looking for some second front against Russia.
Yeah, a crocodile tears for all those people that working the Georgia desk. Okay, all that money, all that effort, all that propaganda, all those lies. Shucks, it didn't
That's
work.
right. That's right. Exactly. And there's still that invitation. Hey, come join NATO. That's still on the books. It's still part of the sort of the every time they have a NATO summit, it's also Georgia will be a member of NATO. Doesn't look like the Georgians are particularly enthusiastic. I think they pretty much said, yeah, we're good. So I think that's right. They're kind of, yeah. After all of those promises. They said Georgians saying kind of what Ukrainians were saying in 2009, 2010. We don't really need this. But it looks like the Georgians have taken a more sensible course than the Ukrainians did.
And because it's a valuable piece of real estate, a wise leadership in Georgia will do the classic balancing. Okay,
Right.
and that's the key to success. When you're a small country,
Right.
when you're isolated, and when you have a small population, a small economy, you have to play your cards very well,
Yeah.
very well.
Right.
Okay. And it looks like that's the pragmatism that is prevalent right now, and good for them. Okay, because what I always screw up the Henry Kissinger phrase about being a friend to America.
Oh yeah, it's how's it? Yes, to be yeah, yeah, to be an enemy of the United States is as dangerous, but to be a friend is even more dangerous. Like something like that. Yeah. So
Deadly, deadly.
to be a friend of the United States is deadly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. We're gonna go. We're going full bore here. George and I are the only two in the sea of podcasts following the elections here, and we're going to continue doing it next week, hopefully. Because even a country like Moldova, George, I hope you're sitting down. Yes, you're sitting down. They will probably have an election result in the evening. The
Yes.
United States will.
You mean not the sort of rolling election that somehow goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks? We'll find out
Poorest
sometime a
country
couple of
and
months after the election.
poorest country, and at least the periphery of Europe, can count their votes in one day.
Yeah.
United States
Yeah.
won't.
Yeah.
It
And
can,
again, yeah,
it
yeah.
can, but it won't. It won't
That's
do
it.
it.
And amazingly enough, well, when we were growing up, it was taken as given that you have an election on one day. Everyone votes, the polling stations close, and then a couple of hours after the polling stations close, we know who won. I mean, that was just a given. No one ever really thought that there'd be something strange about that.
Hey, I was an infant in the '60 campaign. Well, I wasn't even born yet. But almost every single presidential election when I lived in the United States, you went to bed knowing who won.
Yeah, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because
Mhm.
wherever you were living, I mean, you're East Coast. The East Coast results were already they were releasing the East Coast results even before the polling stations on the West Coast closed. So already you knew what was going to happen. So if you can figure out which way, say, New York or New Jersey were voting, then it doesn't matter that the polling stations on the West Coast were still open. So yeah, you knew absolutely early in the evening who had won.
Won't happen on
Right.
November 5th. All
That's
right,
right.
we're going to keep an eye on these two countries that everybody else neglects except for the NATO planners. Okay. Okay. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Today's Sunday. George and I have a live stream tomorrow.
Live stream, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Please join us. Come with comments, criticisms, ideas, suggestions, above all, questions. We love answering your questions. So, homework assignment between now and 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Come up with as many questions as possible. We really enjoy answering them. We find them very stimulating. In the meantime, think about these dogs. It's winter is coming. Winter in Moscow is pretty brutal and they don't really like it. So, we need to put them into a more cheerful frame of mind, and coins clinking in the tip jar usually does the job. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology. And above all, we want to get the dogs through this winter. It's not a pretty sight. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.